we are going to switch topics to terrorism, the border, and foreign policy. First question. Terrorism today is usually associated with Islamic extremism. However, communities along the U.S. southern border, including Phoenix, obviously San Diego, have experienced dramatic increases in kidnappings and violent crime from drug cartels. Is the United States response appropriate and effective? And what should individual states do to mitigate the problem? Frank, we'll probably naturally start with you on this.
Yeah, to answer the first question, is it been appropriate and effective? The answer is no. Why has it not been? I mean, I think what we see with regards to the border is, again, a usurping of the argument. The argument is no longer about our national security. It's about the perception of intolerance. And that has thus driven much of the public policy with regards to that. Even the comprehensive immigration reform doesn't have much to do with the actual security of our borders. The second part of the question, I think, was, what can the states do, or what have the states done?
What should individual states do to mitigate this problem?
I think we saw with SB 1070 an actual state of our union simply trying to reaffirm an existing federal law.
Please explain SB 1070.
Okay. Basically, that was Arizona was trying to, without, again, the argument, many of you probably already know what this is, but in a nutshell, it came down to the conundrum of, is it going to be profiling of these people, asking people if they can prove their citizenship or prove their residency in the United States. A lot of that had to do with the function of the idea, the perception of being profiled. A lot of Hispanic groups, a lot of liberal, leftist, progressive groups, the ACLU included, had terrible issues with that. But the actual enforcement of the law, which was to ensure that these people are being identified and then, if necessary, to either be deported or incarcerated if they've committed a crime, which is a federal law, was not able to be implemented by the state itself, which is just ludicrous. I mean, this is Alice in Wonderland. So I think we have those federal statutes. We have a very interesting perspective from our present Justice Department with Eric Holder at the lead. I think the perception that goes on from the administration right now is not about border security. However, I just gave a talk the other night and did some research with regards to President Obama, who has put more border guards on the border than any other president. But the difference is that there's no comprehensive approach to it. So we've put a lot of stakes in the ground, but we didn't put any mesh in between them, right? And so now we can put that one in the win column. Well, look what I did for border security. Not precisely, because what Governor Romney is advocating is a comprehensive fence, which I think, ask the Israelis, fences make good neighbors. And that's exactly what they did in Gaza and in the northern, in the West Bank. And it cut down terrorism by Palestinians by 80%. So I'm not sure if I answered that question necessarily, but I think the issue becomes, what can we do? I think we need to demand, and it's very difficult because the first charge that you get, and I have been personally charged with this, and that could be farther from the truth, but I've been charged with the idea that because I'm advocating a national security approach, not a law enforcement approach to the border, that has failed, but a national security approach, which doesn't mean you militarize the border. It just means that you take those levers of power that the United States has, diplomatically, in the intelligence arena, militarily, and economically, and you apply those levers of power to be able to ensure that national security is something that we're looking through the prism of border security, not from a law enforcement standpoint. That's how I would go about it.
We'd like to ask Mike and Brad collectively, what legislatively can we do, and obviously state of California, probably not so much at the state level, but even local levels, community levels. Are there anything we can do, or is there anything we can do actively working with our city council to help mitigate some of these issues or increase our security at the border at the local? Is there a possibility of doing that?
Yeah, Rickheimer, gentleman Jim Rickheimer, who was on the city council of Costa Mesa, has set a model, an example I think for what can be done on a local level to deal with some of the demand that's created for people to come over the border illegally. There's a lot of people benevolently just wanting jobs and opportunities. We have to recognize that. But on a local level, though, we can have policies that can decrease the flood of people coming here, and in so doing, give law enforcement and hopefully, I think, the military personnel make it easier for them to really do their job, which was to the fewer people you have coming over, the fewer people demanding to come over, the easier it is, I believe, for us to be effective to stopping the bad guys from coming over from crossing the border. So I think from a municipality point of view, there's real model policies that can be adopted.
Brett, let me ask you a question, because legislatively you know more about this than I do, or legally.
We'll try.
But the whole idea of anchor babies, that's been a real issue. What's your view on legislating an end to that, so that we remove this caveat that if you have what you come across, have a baby, then suddenly you've got citizenship for, in many cases, both the baby and the mother. What do you do about that?
Yeah, well, right now, some argue that legislation wouldn't be sufficient because the Constitution, they would say, is protects it, which it doesn't. And some, I think even out of Arizona, were pushing to compel the courts to definitively rule on that. The case law, actually, in the history, is really compelling towards a much more narrow definition of that constitutional language. So I think that legislation could be helpful. I think something passed by Congress themselves defining that portion of it and giving definition to that portion of the Constitution, which they actually have the power to do, I think would be effective. The sad thing is, if you look at other countries in the world, they don't allow anchor babies. You know, they just don't. To them, it's like, what? Someone sneaks in here illegally, has a baby, and then you right to citizenship? What are you talking about? That's ludicrous. So I think that we, by also referencing what other countries are doing and having that as a model for us to be educated, similar to the pro-life issue, for example. Other countries are much more pro-life than we are in the developed world. I think we can make a lot of progress there too. That's my input.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the anchor baby situation, that was, I was asking Frank, I think it was the 17th Amendment. Yeah, that was not targeted towards, obviously, letting illegals come. That was a post-slavery issue, but that was originally implemented. And I know that Michelle Bachmann was talking about doing some work on that, but, you know, talk about drinking from a fire hose right now with so many different things, and with the presidential elections as well. One thing, back to on Frank's side of that, the southern border is not just the Mexicans coming across. It's a lot of the Hezbollah and Hamas. Right. There's a lot of influence from that part of the world coming in through our southern border when they're finding prayer rugs in the deserts, and that is one of their major ingresses into our country. So that is certainly of concern, where I'm a proponent of a physical barrier, fence, wall, as high as you can go, I guess is good. Fly around it. No, but no, it's a good barrier. They always said it could just, you know, throw ladders and climb over it. I'd rather have a barrier than not, certainly. And then you lead on to the other side, which is the magnet side of things, the jobs, the healthcare, the benefits. And once you stop the magnet, which our economy has done a bit of work on, that really backs off on people needing to be here as well. But the barrier is going to be better for the actual national security side, which was more towards the terrorist side.
Yeah, and also I'd like you to validate, just for the audience, because we talked about this over dinner, to what extent are there just a few terrorists, potentially Muslim radicals, that have come across our border? Or do you think it was like a dozen maybe? Or how many do you think have actually come across our border?
Well, I would simply say that back in 2009, you might have heard of a group called Al-Shabaab. They're out of Somalia, and the Department of Homeland Security was very reluctant, but ultimately ended up sending out, they call it BOLO, which is to law enforcement officers, a report to law enforcement officers that there was the intent for this Al-Shabaab, which is highly influenced by Al-Qaeda, to come into the United States and use Somalian communities, both in Minneapolis, here in San Diego, we have a large Somalian community, and so to come in and to conduct terrorist operations. And that went back and forth on how legitimate that was. I can simply tell you, getting back to what they call the third country nationals, yes, we have lots of Mexican immigrants that come across that do want to pick our lettuce. They do want to pick our tomatoes. They want to make a better life for themselves. To a certain extent, I understand that. But they're finding more and more third country nationals that are coming from places that don't like us very much. And I'm not sure that they're necessarily, and that's not to say that everybody that's coming from there has the intent to kill us, but there's the capability to do so. You know, when you can, if you can tunnel a ton of marijuana into Otay, you can smuggle dozens, if not hundreds of people. What would it take for a terrorist to take a small quantity of a radiological dirty bomb material, come across underneath one of these borders, and detonate it here in San Diego? The capability is there. The probability I'm not so sure about. That's what keeps me up at night. And we were talking about this earlier. God forbid if Iran ends up getting attacked either by the United States or in some coalition fashion, or Israel decides to do it on their own. Hezbollah, everybody, is the 800-pound gorilla in the terrorist arena. Al-Qaeda was, you know, the new wide receiver on that scored the touchdown. Everybody's, who's that guy? Where did he come from? Wow, he's wow. Hezbollah is the 49ers of the 80s, okay? These guys are the kingpins of the terrorist world. They know how to do it right. And when you have Hezbollah operatives that have been sighted and seen in Tijuana, they're not there to see, you know, the donkey that's colored like the zebra, okay? They're there for other reasons, especially if they've come from Venezuela, and many of you may know about the ties between Venezuela and Caracas and Tehran, and how that military relationship, and how they've been, the Quds forces, which are basically the special operations forces of the Iranian military who train Hezbollah, have been working in Mexico. So that's, I mean, those are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, and that's why I'm saying that this becomes a national security issue. It's no longer, you know, Barney Fife out there, you know, on the range doing God's work, God bless him, but he and his six-shooter are not going to work up against an AK-47 with a 50-round drum. That's what our law enforcement folks are going up against.
Yep. Hey, Frank, maybe you could expound a little bit on the Muslim Brotherhood. I know is deeply in the heart of this, and my feeling on occasion is that we haven't seen as many terrorist attacks because they've fairly effectively infiltrated our government in a lot of different levels.
That's right.
Well, I don't know about the infiltration into the government, other than that I know there's been a lot of discussion about having certain Muslim voices at the table, and then when they kind of do a little bit deeper digging, they come to find out that these people were associated with CAIR, which is the Council on Islamic Relations, who have been co-conspirators and were indicted in the situation in Florida. These are not people that necessarily have America's best interests in mind. That's not to say that because somebody is Muslim, therefore they need to be singled out in any way, shape, or form. I can simply say that when they do the background checks, as Mike is talking about, you come to find out that, yeah, this person was involved with the Muslim Brotherhood, who, oh, by the way, after what happened in Egypt, we were concerned Mubarak left, he was defeated, the military took charge, and then the Muslim Brotherhood stepped basically in and is now on the precipice of controlling Egypt, which is just a geostrategic kerfuffle of great proportion. It's the idea that Egypt, that owns the Suez Canal, would be taken over and run by the Muslim Brotherhood is just something that keeps geostrategists up at night. So I would simply say that it's amazing to me how we come to find out that this particular cleric or these particular administrators within these groups, you come to find out that they have these ties. I'm just wondering why they're not doing the thorough background checks that I had to get or other people had to get all the way back to high school.
Frank, can you confirm that I've been told there's as high as 32 identified terrorist training facilities in this country? Now, they don't call them that, but that's effectively what they are.
Yeah, there was some disturbing reporting that came out about a camp that was primarily headed with Muslim youth and young men that I think was in upstate New York, where they've discovered that these guys were doing a lot more than archery and finger painting, and I think that has been seen. We've also seen and what gets brushed with that, of course, is the militia groups. that we see, and then also there are some right-wing Israeli groups as well. But what we've seen is a greater preponderance of these organizations that teeter, right, that teeter on this idea of assembling and talking about their cultural heritage, and then the literature that you're finding, and the thrust of why they're getting together and having their get-togethers is a lot more sinister than it made out to be. I can't confirm the 32, but I know that they're out there.
Thank you, Frank, for the nightmares. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good grief. I'm going to go buy another 1,000 rounds when I get home. So we're going to take a break. I appreciate the panel. We're going to come back with Agenda 21 and then the election. The next topic is Agenda 21. And this one, I am new to learning about it, and I want you to hear about it as well if you are brand new to hearing about it. So I wanted to start with Barbara and have you describe Agenda 21 and its potential impacts on our community.
How many people in here have heard of Agenda 21? I see some familiar faces. Okay, so who's heard of ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives? Or, as it's called now, because they had to change the name, of course. It slipped my mind. Anyway,
it's a shorter
version.
It's a governance for sustainability.
Huh?
Local government.
Yeah, local governance for
That's
sustainability. All these long words. Anyway, United Nations Agenda 21, they now call it Sustainable Development or Smart Growth, but the intention is to take away our private property rights. And our private property rights also mean the fruit of our labor. When we work, our money belongs to us to do with it what we will. Our founding fathers wanted us to own property because that was a way of number one, having skin in the game. You cared for your property. It was a way of gaining wealth. It was a way of passing on to your children your wealth and also your businesses. But in United Nations Agenda 21, they think that private property rights need to be given up for the good of the community. The word that begins with C, called communism, because you go for the greater good. But the way they're limiting our private property rights is there's excessive government regulations, the EPA primarily, Clean Water Act. And with this excessive regulation, they're limiting what we can do on our property. Does anybody know anybody who has tried to remodel their house and they've been unable to do so? Or maybe somebody hasn't been able to work on their property because there's an endangered plant or animal. I know someone who is a landscape architect. She was working with a man who was putting a pool in his backyard. And when the building inspector came over, prior to this man buying this piece of property, a tennis court had been put on the property. And when the building inspector came over, he said, oh, by the way, that tennis court extends over into this space that doesn't belong to you. You must make this tennis court smaller. And by the way, those pine trees are not indigenous to this area. You must take them out. And oh, over here in this corner, we have some endangered plants. And I believe he was on about 5 or 10 acres. And he took an acre in the corner where they couldn't build anything because there was an endangered plant there. Now, birds fly and the wind blows. And you always have plants that are going to end up in different places. But if it's an endangered plant, that plant trumps what you want to do on your property. So by the time this man finished, it ended up costing him $10,000 more, and he finally got his pool in. But that is how extreme and excessive this is. And you might hear an isolated incident and you just think it's one thing, but it actually has to do with everybody. They shut off the water in the San Joaquin Valley because of the Delta smell. Well, the Delta smell isn't even indigenous to that area. The San Joaquin Valley was the breadbasket of the United States and part of the world. And they shut off that water, and now it's a dust bowl. So Agenda 21, when United Nations Agenda 21 was started, it started many, many years ago. In 1972, there was a woman by the name of Rachel Carson. She wrote a book called Silent Spring about DDT and how bad DDT was. I grew up in Navy housing. There was a Jeep that used to spray in Navy housing. I used to run behind the Jeep because there was all this fog coming out. never bothered any of us. Then along came the fluorocarbons with the hairsprays. My mom used Aquanet. Never stand the smell of that stuff. But anyway, she always used Aquanet. You couldn't have those. Then it came out that there was nothing wrong with that. And then came overpopulation, and then it was global cooling. So it's been one thing after another, and they finally came upon the environment. It was the one thing they could get everybody to agree upon. And so they use the environment. We have to save the environment because we live here, we must take care of the planet. And we've all done that. America is an amazing place. I remember when my dad was stationed at the Pentagon, if you fell into the Potomac River, you immediately went to the doctors because it was so polluted. I remember some of the Great Lakes when they were polluted. Well, we've cleaned it up. So as one county commissioner, Richard Rothschild in Carroll County, Maryland, he campaigned on kicking Ickley out of his area. It's a farming community. And he said the EPA is the worst environmentalist because they send everything to China and Mexico and to India. And those countries don't have the same rules and regulations that we do. So it became, in 1992, George Bush Sr. signed the agreement. It was a soft treaty, so it didn't have to go in front of Congress. Clinton came along and through an executive order started the President's Council for Sustainable Development, and Al Gore spent 8 years implementing all the language for sustainable development under the American Planning Association into every part of the government. HUD, Transportation, Department of Defense. So it's been in there since the 90s. And everybody has just begun to find out about it in the last 3 years. The Tea Parties are the ones that really took this on, and they have fought it in a lot of different counties. And now the number of people who are a member of ICLEI. ICLEI is the computer program that you buy, that a city will buy. San Diego is a member of ICLEI. It's a computer program that you buy that tells you about your greenhouse gas emissions, where your runoffs are, all the things you need to do to be a green economy. And then, but everything ends up being cookie cutter. What they make in San Diego, the housing in San Diego, what they like to do is they want to get you out of your car. They want you to ride your bike. And I can see we don't have a lot of young people here. Can you imagine going to Costco for your coupons and having to ride your bike home with your big roll of Charmin on the back of your bike? It's not possible. Or what would you look like by the time you got to work if you rode your bike? I like to ride my bike, but it's for pleasure. But they would like to get us out of our cars. They would like us to live in homes that are near transit. How many people take transit except when you have jury duty? 5% of the population uses public transit. But they would like us to get out of our cars. They also want us to live in stack 'em and pack 'ems. They would like to have mixed use where you have commercial downstairs and you have homes above it. So then you can walk to your places where they want you to be able to walk to work. They want you to be able to go shopping close to where you live. Now, if you're young and you're single, that's great. You want to go out for a night on the town and you don't want to drive, that's great. But when you finally have a family, you want a yard, you want to put the kids in the yard, you want to put the dogs in the yard, and you want your car to take you wherever you need to go. As someone up in Northern California who's doing all this, she said, you're driving your kids around and you're just sitting there waiting for them to be finished with their Spanish practice or their soccer practice, and you're bored out of your mind waiting for the kids, but you want that car to take you where you want to go. And part of it, I remember Dinah Shore, see the USA in your Chevrolet? You want your car because it gives you freedom. United Nations Agenda 21 wants to take away our freedom and our liberty. And it is so far implemented everywhere that it's kind of like we're on the precipice, but more and more people have woken up about it. In California, we have AB 32, California's cap and trade, and there's a couple in Orange County that are fighting this. AB 32 will kind of like be the death knell for California, and the amount of money, that AB 32 will actually cost the state of California, because they want to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels. I don't even think they had any kind they didn't have any statistics to show what they were in 1990. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to have statistics.
But California has plenty of money.
California's
We're
broke.
rolling in it.
California's broke.
Just happens to be in the red.
Can we attach to that in 1990 levels of greenhouse gases, the 1990 levels of spending in the state? Can we combine the two, maybe? Maybe I'd think
Yeah.
about it if they did that.
Think about it.
But over a period of 10 years, okay, if AB 32 goes in, they're going to be selling carbon credits. Do you know what carbon credits are?
Indulgent. It's called cap and trade.
Yeah, it's cap and trade. And what it would be, say, Cantor Fitzgerald is a stock brokerage firm, and they've already opened up an office in Sacramento. On August 15th, they want to do a practice sell carbon credits. So let's imagine I am Cantor Fitzgerald. Dr. Scarborough is going to be a farmer, and he has cows, and they produce methane gas. So he has to buy carbon credits. Brad is going to be the seller of a carbon credit. So he needs to buy a $100 carbon credit. He wants to sell the $100. I have speculators. For $100, someone's offering me, say San Diego Gas and Electric is offering me $250 for a $100 carbon credit. And then I have someone else who wants to give me $400 for a carbon credit. So by the time the carbon credit is sold, Dr. Scarborough is going to pay $500 for this $100 carbon credit, and I, Cantor Fitzgerald, is going to make $400.
Right.
Over the course of 10 years, it'll cost $182 billion. But for all the other parts that are included, it's going to cost $450 billion. The amount of CO2 in the atmosphere will decrease from 413 parts per million to 412.9 parts per million.
Oh my God.
See, don't forget, they're trading air.
Yeah,
air.
this is air, and I remember CO2 was good for plants.
Right.
Yeah.
The people that grow marijuana pump that into those marijuana places, and also people that grow plants. You put CO2, it makes the plant. That's why the plants always are beautiful when you buy them.
CO2 is what we exhale, by the way. Just
Yeah,
so you know
that's what we
how
exhale.
dangerous it can be. So stop breathing for the good
Their
of the
goal,
environment.
their goal is to cut the population also.
There you go.
Well,
Hold
that's
your,
another
hold
part.
your breath for the good of the environment.
Yes, yes. There's a Professor William Nordhaus of Yale, who believes in global warming. He said, the best benefit to cost ratio is to do nothing for 50 years. San Diego is moving forward with a climate mitigation and adaptation map, and they think that the harbor is going to be flooding. It is, I mean, the money they're spending now is absolutely absurd. But anyway, there is a couple by the name of Pam and Warren Duffy, and they are going to have a bus that's going to go to Sacramento in August 15th. They're going to have carbon credit practice runs, selling carbon credit practice runs. So what they want to do is they want to get a bunch of people together. We're going to have motorcycles and farmers and tractors and farm animals circle the State House. They're working on permits right now for the, for the animals and things like that. We're going to circle the State House, and they're going to file a lawsuit against the California Air Resources Board, which is CARB. CARB is the one who determines the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, whenever they want to raise taxes and they bring out cutting the firemen and the policemen and the teachers and closing the library hours, CARB, California Air Resources Board, they're paid $80,000 a year. They have an unlimited number of people they can hire. CARB is the one that needs to be sued. So we're hoping to get a lot of people together. I mean, Brad's talking about, okay, we have a lot of problems. We need some solutions. I have on my table over there, I have a list if people are interested in going to Sacramento in August. Join us. I also have started a group, Americans Protecting Property Rights. We have a website up. It's kind of funky right now. We really haven't had time to spend time on it. But we're all Americans, and we're all protecting private property rights, because that's one of the things that makes America great.
What is the name of it again?
AmericansProtectingPropertyRights.com.
Mike, you have some things you want to add?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Comes to Agenda 21. You can't see what you need to realize is there's almost no end to what you can learn about this. I'm one of those that started hearing about this about 3 years ago, and you know, half the people are saying it's a conspiracy. This is absolutely not a conspiracy. I am running for city council for Aliso Viejo specifically because my community adopted the ICLEI plan for our little community. Now I'm in South Orange County. It's supposed to be Orange County's seen as somewhat of a conservative enclave, but Aliso Viejo is one exception to that. And you would be surprised, this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. Obviously, George H.W. Bush brought this to us. Let me go back, I want to cover a couple of things. I know it's such a massive issue that it's hard to really grasp because it sounds so unbelievable. Back in 1957, how many of you have heard of the book, The Naked Communists by W.M. Skousen? Cleon Skousen, that's right. Well, he mentioned that for the Communist Party, they really realized early on that they could not defeat America from the outside militarily. They had to come in and defeat us from the inside. That is what all of this is about. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Dick Morris. He's on Fox all the time.
Oh, yeah.
He came out with, sorry for the name of the book, it's called Screwed. Came out a week ago. About a third of the way through the book. And this book covers a lot of these United Nations treaties in a whole vast array of areas that are all not specifically all part of Agenda 21, but Agenda 21 is a large part of it. I don't think he uses the term Agenda 21. A lot of talk show hosts won't. Rush won't. Mark Levin really won't. They talk about it, around it, vaguely, but it's a lot of the what's called non-governmental organizations that are proponents, are backing this, and that's where the conspiracy is. Why don't these guys say the words? I know Glenn Beck is now talking a lot about Agenda 21. He formed his own radio show. He said, hey, I did that to talk about what I want to talk about. I know Mark Levin skirted it, but he talks about these very issues. Well, what happened was, there's a lot of setup for that, and they said, how do we get America to sort of defeat itself, how to deindustrialize itself from the inside? Because, hey, they can't beat us militarily, and we've talked about talked about homosexuality in schools. That's defeating ourselves morally. That's also part of the naked communists. And this is how they're planning to get us to deindustrialize ourselves, how to destroy ourselves from the inside. It makes complete sense. And in the 60s, they decided they talked about a lot of different areas. You heard of the Iron Mountain Report, possibly. They talked about the different ways that they could do it. I think somebody even brought up aliens, but they had to find a common enemy. They poo-pooed the alien idea, but the environment was what they hung their hat on. And that's why in the 70s you started hearing about global cooling. It's all the alarmism. It's catastrophic. It's going to come to an end. The world is going to come to an end if they don't stop America from being evil. You may want to write down, if you're taking notes, write down Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong has earned his money in Canada in the oil industry, and he was the opening speaker at the Agenda 21 Rio Earth Summit in 1992. He basically says, and I'll read a little bit here, he stated that the industrialized countries, targeting America, developed and benefited from the unsustainable patterns of production and consumption, which have produced our present dilemma. He's talking about the global warming issues. It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, once again in America, involving high meat intake, consumptions of large amounts of frozen food, and convenience foods, the use of fossil fuels. Why do you think they're not drilling? Why do you think they're blocking? Did you hear what a couple of weeks ago they were talking about the largest fossil fuel find, basically, I believe in Colorado, almost doubling, almost more than the entire world combined at this point. It's phenomenal. So really don't have to worry about that. But the fossil fuels, he talks about appliances, home and workplace and air conditioning, suburban housing. The big thing is, so I want to cover those suburbs real quick. We've got to end the suburbs, the highly stacked housing, because they do not want to support the transportation out to those suburbs. And they say all these things are not sustainable. A shift is necessary toward lifestyles less geared to environmentally damaging consumption patterns. And other comments he's made, he said it is the world government's responsibility to get and force America to get rid of its basic cars, get rid of all aspects of the industrialized side of our country. They also want to, their focus is also to destroy families, destroy religion, destroy all the things that have made us great. And we're acquiescing to this. We are acquiescing to what they want to do to us. And that's, you see it in Hollywood. And I understand why it's tough, because you've got the media against us. You've got Hollywood against us. I had to go back last night, went to the Avengers again last night just because I love that movie. It's a pro-America, pro-fight for our, so I got to go, oh, it's a wonderful movie.
Yeah,
I went back
to see it, and I'd highly recommend it.
It's pro-America, either way. But I had to throw it on there because I had to go back a second time. But these issues, I always like to go back and look at what's the root cause behind what they're doing. If you look at the minutia, all the little pieces of it, it's hard to really understand what in the world they're doing. But if you look at what their goals are to get us to self-destruct. The goals are to get us to stop what we're doing, stop our living. They mess with our food. It's all about food. It's all about getting rid of air conditioning. There's a gal that is a proponent of this. She's on the liberal side, but we love her nonetheless. Rosa Koire, Koire. She's fantastic. She has some great YouTube videos out there really breaking this down. Oh, you got a book?
There's a flyer back here that has her info.
Great, yeah, she's got a wonderful, removing the green mask. But
Behind the green mask.
Behind the green mask.
You read it a little bit, you got the tab.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. It's a wonderful book.
Almost highlight.
You should also look up the kind of the grandfather of this whole thing is Michael Shaw. Michael Shaw, S-H-A-W, fantastic. He's got a lot of YouTube information on that as well. I've been blessed because for some reason Michael thinks I'm funny, so he calls me just to chat once in a while, and it's kind of neat to have the leader of the whole movement calling me. I hope we're going to be at a event up in LA, I think on June 10th, but I'm waiting to find out if he and Rosa are coming down for that. I will be videotaping and posting that whole conference if they do come down, so that'll be great. But
and the purpose of that conference?
The purpose of that conference is, a year ago it was all on the global warming issue, but this year it's going to be on global governance and fighting the global governance, which is what we all need to focus on. And they are entrenched. We all know about George Soros. We all know about the different entities. David Rockefeller, of course. Now, David Rockefeller was close to Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong lived on a ranch in Colorado for quite a few years. And Kissinger, Rockefeller, a lot of these guys were there, and that's where they really had time to sit down and talk about how they're going to make this happen. And so we got to be aware. We have to be aware. But locally, this has all been pushed, as Barbara said, through Bush signing it initially, and then Clinton and Gore really implemented it into our systems through giving $1 million to the American Planning Association, the APA, and they have infiltrated that into all the local general plans, and now in the city. Every city has to come up with a general plan, and they are being forced to implement the Agenda 21 issues into that. And they use the terminology. They've got the words, they've got the buzzwords: sustainability, bikeability, walkability, and all the nice, pretty words. And of course we want to be green. We want to be sensitive to our community. And this is how they do that. And they do it through we can go into a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, Delphi techniques. Have any of you been to local community meetings so they want to talk about this stuff? Go to these meetings, you'll see these, what is this? The kind of, oh yeah, they're manipulation tactics which they use thing called the Delphi technique. I've been to these meetings, they're all the same. They have the facilitator, and they already know what the result is going to be before you ever get there. But what they need is consensus, or the appearance of consensus, from the local community. So they want people showing up, and they all leave feeling as though they had some input in the nightmarish disaster that they're putting us through, but they never do. You're always acquiescing to what the facilitator does, and they've got their plan already in place. They just want to say, we had all these meetings, a bunch of people showed up, and I've had them come back on me with that. Oh, but there's consensus in the community. I'm like, this is in San Clemente they're talking about that. I said, seriously, if you know San Clemente, there's a bunch of hills back, a bunch of homes all the way back into the hills, and people don't want to drive their cars. So you telling me that you specifically asked the community, do you no longer want to drive your cars, you want to be able to walk down to the shopping centers? Those are miles down the road. There's no way. They don't ask you that. They just go to a meeting, you hear about all the nice things they want to talk about doing, and they come back and saying the consensus of the community is they want to walk to their stores right down the street. It's not right. And it's what they're coming back thinking that they're emboldened to do that. And once again, when you've got the media, you've got Hollywood, you've got society on your side, and all these lies are behind it, it makes it really tough. So, just a couple
What should we do? Because obviously, it's funny, coming from the South, some of the best environmentalists I know are hunters. All the guys I know are hunted with, because they take
those are the best.
They take care of their environment.
Yeah,
they know how to talk about sustainability.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of what you hear in the media of what sustainability is.
Talk to Ted Nugent about that.
Exactly. Yes, I know several guys that are just like Ted, coming from Louisiana. So, but what should we do as far as personal freedom and environmental concerns? How do we reconcile those?
You go to your local, you can get on your, get the agenda for your local city council meetings, your planning meetings. Show up there and find out where they're spending your money. You will, I mean, your jaw will be, you'll be picking it up off the floor when you see who's getting your money. A lot of times, some of the smaller towns, they'll actually have it on, you can watch it on TV, so you don't even have to go in there, because some of it's rather boring. But just show up and ask questions, because they're spending your dollar. Agenda 21 is global to local, and we fight it on the local level. In San Diego, anybody that's been running has gotten a little packet of information from me about UN Agenda 21, sustainable development, and I want it kicked out of San Diego. Anybody that, last September I was back in DC, and we gave a packet to every single district in California, back in DC, nothing. Tom McClintock was the only one that's talking about it now. Duncan Hunter is starting to recognize it, but he won't talk about it. He understands it, it's on a local level, and it's all happening on a local level. But for the last 15 years, all of our local representatives have gone to meetings like for governors and for representatives, and they've all heard sustainable development, so it's like the buzzword that everybody uses, and it sounds like it's okay. But it's not. It's the meaning. It's like there's a mothership behind sustainable development, and that's United Nations Agenda 21, and it's the destruction of our private property rights.
And I'll make a point that this isn't a fun side of the fight. It's not a lot of fun to go to these meetings. It's mundane. They're boring. But that's where this stuff is coming in. I mean, I've shown up to them, and often with a video camera in hand. I don't ever do anything with a video, but it sure intimidates the guys. You know, you got a video camera in their face when you're questioning them hard, and they're very tentative as to what they say. So I highly recommend having that video camera, or somebody there with a video camera. They can't stop you. They can't ask you not to videotape, and they really watch what they say. So that's always a good idea to have a video person with you. So they're not, no, I hate to say it this way, they're not sexy meetings to be at. They're not the fun. You're not meeting the people, and you're not always going to be running into Democrats, to be sure. And I went to a meeting. I was shocked when I saw two of the Republican mayors that I know and had a little bit of respect for. Now they're two of my biggest adversaries, and I'm getting calls to back off. And you know when you're getting the phone calls to back off, you're hitting the right people, and you're punching the right guys in the nose. And we need to get more people out to these meetings that are not fun. They put them at awkward times. They put them at times that are inconvenient for those of us who work. Thank goodness I own my own company, and that's by design. They put them at times where nobody can make it, nobody would want to make it. 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. It's just not a time you want to go sit down and listen to a transportation planning meeting. It's just not fun. But that's what we need to do. And I think, folks like myself and Barbara, we need to make that more public as to when those meetings are, when and where and what they are. You put them out on social media, you put them out on Facebook, you get it out there, and you say what it is and who's involved, and you name names. And even if not everybody can go, social media is going to get out there and they're going to see the names.
Okay, real quick point also on the practical things you can do, which was just mentioned. In El Cajon, we had a redevelopment agency, and as you all know, the money has been pulled in California from redevelopment agencies, but not across the country though. And before the money was pulled, my buddies there in El Cajon started holding them accountable, the redevelopment agency, requesting audits and the public records document, getting information on all the materials that they had to back up the numbers, back up where the numbers, where did this go, where did this money go. One after one, it began to resign. The redevelopment agency imploded and was non-existent at the time the funding was pulled. So by using the Public Records Act and things like that, we can hold them accountable by forcing them to show their numbers. And if we show that if they're like this one was out there in the El Cajon area, the numbers aren't there and the money's not there, they don't know where it went. That's a really just a real basic practical tool that we can use that was very effective there. Well, also one other point too, it also applies, if you don't think it affects you, say, well, I'm not a business person or I'm not going to, church growth and expansion, number one curtailment of church growth and expansion is not lack of members or money. It's local government saying we don't want you. And I'm going to tell you, we had a huge breakthrough this last year. We had the Pacific Justice Institute took on a case for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Ninth Circuit, in a nutshell, to save time, ruled that local governments, San Leandro, can never keep out a church for alleged negative economic impact reasons, including not paying property tax. So, huge victory has been scored for us here on the West Coast, and that's a quadrant, it's a segment that we've seen a lot of that overt government control manipulation to squelch growth with regards to religious institutions. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, a couple other fighting points. Michael Shaw I was talking to the other day, and maybe Brad can help it with the name. It's malfeasance of treason. There's a word now. Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, what they've been doing is the word malfeasance of something of treason. It's basically a charge of treason. There are groups up in Northern California are going to the city council and at different county supervisory levels, and they are fully educating them on what this is, where it's from, and who's involved, and how it's coming in. And when these city councilmen refuse to back off, they have now filed at least one, if not more, charges of treason, basically, to these city council members, and it's starting to, that'll shake you up a little bit. So that's a great way to do it, and it's a great way that he is trying to build that, and I'm watching how that's working for him, and hopefully we'll. That's why we just purely try to educate. You try to make sure these city council and these supervisory folks know that this is critical. One other item up in Sonoma County, and as Brad mentioned, churches and permits. It's all done through permits, zoning, allowing you to build. You can, own however many acres out in a certain area, and they will hate you at every which way for zoning. They will not let you build on your property. In the county of Sonoma, in the county roads, and I believe let me read some rough numbers, approximately 1,300 miles of roads in Sonoma County, not the cities, but the counties, and they are only going to maintain and pave 150 miles of those 1,300 mile roads. What is that going to do to the outskirt properties and the values and the accessibility of those areas? And that's how they're doing it, is they want us out of the rural areas and into the compact areas so they can A, control us, B, watch us. And once again, when it comes to communism, they have to get rid of private property ownership, and we are quote unquote the masses. We're citizens, not subjects, and that's one of the important things.
Frank, you have a question?
Well, actually, I went in a couple of directions, but I would just simply say that I spent 10 years living in Europe, and I spent almost 4 years of that living in the former Soviet Union. And what is disturbing to me is that we tend to think, as the remaining superpower, that we are immune, that we are impervious But the Soviet Union was a former superpower as well. And I just bring that to your attention in that when I lived in Europe, I went to school in Germany, and many of my German friends were greens. They were watermelons, we called them, because they were green on the outside and red on the inside. And I can tell you that exactly what Mike and Brad and Barbara are talking about has unfolded over the last 30 years. Did I get it? Yeah, there you go. Do I get extra credit? Do I get extra credit if I can sing the Soviet anthem?
I've seen Hunt for Red October. I can sing the song.
So I would simply tell you that that's exactly what they're describing in the urban layout and the urban planning is exactly the way Europe has come about. I've been to homes of my friends that live in these very places that they're talking about. And you can tell that they're frustrated beyond belief because they bit into this green lie. Yeah. And they're living it, and their children are living it. And it's pervasive throughout Western Europe now. Of course, Eastern Europe had the shackles and the lingering decay of the former Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union itself, the oligarchs notwithstanding. Many of the people in the leadership positions are still many of those that aspire to socialist, Bolshevik, communist ideology. Putin is, version 3.0. He's on his way. He's coming back. So I would just simply say that, and in that, the UN is also very much involved and by the way, the multilateralists throughout the world, in the Euros, all throughout the world, they look at the United States as the single nail that gets their nylons caught through the door to make all this happen. And I would just invite you to take a look at the history of the Green Party in Europe and how they encroached into, and now have completely, without any fanfare, they are socialists through and through. Hence, case in point, France. And
the UN's behind all of this. The UN is behind all of this. And what they're using is our recent financial collapse here, and what that is, the way our government, or those who are negotiating, in my opinion, against us, since there was so much damage around the world from our financial collapse, we're running with our tail between our legs. We're acquiescing to the rest of the world out of guilt. And those of you who know psychology, guilt is a bad thing. You will do things that you do not want to do or shouldn't do because you feel guilty.
I would just ask, for the first time, I think in our history, we had the advent of a green czar, Van Jones. He came and he went very, very suddenly. But if you remember, Valerie Jarrett made some very disparaging comments, not that they were meant to be, but certainly towards the United States, saying, well, we've had our eyes on Van for such a long time. He's been such a great advocate. We really are glad to have him on the team. When you come and you peel the onion on who Van Jones was, and you come to find out that he is as... Go ahead.
I knew exactly who he was.
Right, and I was just curious, the question I had for you guys is he intertwined in all of this in some way?
Van Jones, absolutely. Van Jones is deeply embedded. Somebody once said that now he's out of the White House, he's even more dangerous because we won't be seeing what he's doing all the time. But Center for American Progress, funded by George Soros, of course, is deep at the heart of almost all of this, along with Maurice Strong and the United Nations. And if you looked at as well, the expansion of the G8, I believe they're having the G8 summit, when it expanded the G20, the expansion of that was specifically to downgrade the power of America. Yes, I got this out of Dick Morris's book last week, but because we still only have one vote. The European Union's got 5 votes, I believe, and all these other third world dictatorships and these other entities that they put in there, they each have a vote too. So a lot of it's to diminish our power on a global level, all backed by the European Union, backed by the United Nations, and all of this is back to the old redistribution of wealth from the rich Americans to the rest of the world, as though, they need to, and I think some of the unions were saying that, workers of the world unite. Well, what do you think when you try to level the playing field and you've got a country like America, you can't bring everybody up to our level. You have to bring us down to theirs. And that's in that spirit of fairness that they always talk about. is that they have to cripple the successful. Okay. Yeah, you have to cripple the successful, and then I brought that up, you know, on a couple different levels you can talk to when you're talking to kids. I mean, as weird as it sounds, I'm a juggler. Okay, I juggle. I admit it. I've come clean. But people say, gee, I've always wanted to juggle, and I wish I could juggle. Well, I've juggled for 40 years. So I come back to them and say, is it fair that I can juggle and you can't juggle? They go, well, what does that mean? Well, I've worked 40 years at learning how to do this. Is it fair? It's the same thing with the successful, wealthy people in our country. They've worked night and day and put their lives at risk and put their families at risk to earn. That's what they chose to do, is to earn a fortune and make money and be successful. Fair isn't an issue, unless you break my hands and so I can't juggle anymore. That's the only way to level somebody who has worked hard to learn a trade, a skill, a thing. And so fairness, and they're trying to do that on a global level, take us down, wipe us out, destroy us from inside, and because they could not destroy us militarily. So, hey, have us destroy ourselves. That's what it's all about. And we are, now we're speaking up. And that's why, I never thought I'd be behind a microphone, but I've been a fighter since I was a kid. My parents, hey, they didn't like it, but at least it sticks with me, so I'm here to fight for everyone now, and I've got kids, and I've got, and Lord willing, we have grandkids, and we need to take care of those kids. We haven't given them we have not given them the future that we should have given them.
And the things that happen even locally, I coached rugby up at Point Loma Nazarene, up on the hill. If you guys have been up there, there's a softball field. Well, there used to be a softball field.
Do you keep score?
Down the hill. I do. It was college rugby. It was pretty good. But no, there was a softball field, and if you didn't know, Point Loma Nazarene's women's softball team was one of the best in the nation in their division. They played in a small, it's NAIA, it's like Division 4, because they only had 2,200 students up there. The Coastal Commission decided, because they own that land where the softball field is, that that land needed to be natural. Now, they didn't take it back to develop it, to make a park out of it. They just said you can't use it for anything organized. And you can't mow it anymore. They must, and the Coastal Commission made this decision about 2.5 years ago. Now, the repercussions of this at Point Loma Nazarene, small school, 2,200 students, because of Title IX, they lost an entire women's sport. They now had to say, okay, because of Title IX, which is the balance of women and men's athletics, we have to cut a men's sport. They nuked their whole track program too. At Point Loma Nazarene, right up there, all because of the Coastal Commission's decision to take back, not for development or make a park out of it, but to solely say it has to be sagebrush and natural landscape. And even the rugby guys, when they closed the softball program, we would still practice there at 6 a.m. because all the people who live along there would use that for their dogs, but they wouldn't usually come to about 7:15 to walk their dogs in the park. We got kicked off. We're not organized. I'm not even part of the school. We were like a club. So the school wasn't even saying, you guys go use that. And I got kicked off of that field solely because we were using it. There was more than like 3 people there, which made it an organized event.
Oh my God.
That's in San Diego. That's happening now. And that was a domino effect for the athletic program at Point Loma Nazarene, which is right here, all because of the Coastal Commission.
If I could recommend a book with Thomas Sowell. It's fantastic. A lot of us know Thomas Sowell. Intellectuals and Society. I've read that a few weeks ago, and phenomenal. It's a little deep. It's Thomas Sowell, mind you, but it is brilliant as it looks at what the intellectuals are doing to our society, because they never have to pay for their ideas. Unlike, unfortunately, I've gotten to know Burt Rattan recently, who's an amazing aeronautical designer, and he says that, hey, if his designs don't work, he gets sued, people die. If a bridge falls down, the engineers get sued, but the scientists and the intellectuals never really have to pay for their ideas. Whatever happened to Karl Marx and how many have died on his ideas. And so these globalists and these environmentalists, that's the biggest danger. They're talking about alarmism. The alarmism is the fact that they're destroying our energy base. They're tearing down our dams that are hydroelectric because they want to make them all natural again.
They're going after coal?
And coal and every other thing.